Zdravo svima, dobrodošli u još jednu epizodu Agelast podcasta u specijalnom izdanju u saradnji sa Sarajevo Film Festivalom. Nalazimo se ovdje u Sarajevu, kao što smo to najavljivali, naravno, i donosimo vam razgovore sa učesnicima ovog festivala. Ovoga puta čućete razgovor sa Kordom Jeffersonom, u pitanju američki pisac, scenarista, producent i sada reditelj. Osvojio je Oskara za svoj film koji nosi naziv American Fiction, koji je zapravo adaptacija romana Erasure, koji je napravio 2023. godine i dobio je Oskara za najbolju adaptaciju knjige u scenario, odnosno adaptacije knjige u film. U pitanju je njegov rediteljski debi, dakle ovo je njegov prvi film i sa njime odmah dobio Oskara, što je zaista ogroman uspeh. Inače i poznat kao jako dobar scenarista koji je radio na brojnim velikim i poznatim projektima poput Watchmena, poput Station 11, poput Master of None i drugih projekata. Godinama je pre toga radio kao novinar, tako da ćemo imati puno tema za razgovor i imat ćete prilike da ga upoznate malo bolje. A ako niste gledali American Fiction film, preporučam da ga gledate sa Jeffreyem Wrightom u glavnoj ulozi. Dakle, naš sledeći gost, reditelj, pisac, scenarista Cord Jefferson. Uživajte. Hello, Cord.
How are you?
Awesome. Now, I'm awesome. You?
I'm great. I'm great.
You were just telling me that this is not your first time around these parts.
No. I have a lot of really close friends from Bosnia who immigrated to, or they were refugees during the war in the 90s, and they immigrated to my hometown of Tucson, Arizona. And I just became really close with them. And so I've maintained contact with them over the years. And one of them, Vadis, moved back to Sarajevo in 2005, about 20 years ago. And so
wow,
we came...
2005 was 20 years ago. That's
I know, it's scary.
It's really scary. It's insane.
It's scary. I'm getting old.
When you say 20 years ago, I'm always thinking like 1995, not 2005.
Exactly.
That's like yesterday, man. Come on.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so he moved back here, and some friends of mine and we came to visit him in I think 2013, 2012. I'm not sure anymore, but we just they like to ride motorcycles. I'm afraid of motorcycles, and so I drove in sort of like a tail car behind them. But three of my friends sort of rode motorcycles down the Croatian coast into Sarajevo. We started in Zagreb. It was really, really wonderful. I love it.
How long did the trip take?
I think we did it all in about 5 days. You know, we could have done it much faster, but I think it was just sort of, we wanted to stop and just be leisurely.
And it's a beautiful route.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's one of the most beautiful drives I've ever done.
So you're feeling like at home here, right?
Yeah, I really do. I mean, so besides just my friend Fadis, who lives in Sarajevo, being here, there's also about 12 of my friends from the States came over for this festival.
For this festival?
Yeah, and like five of whom are Bosnian themselves. So a couple of my friends brought their children with them, and their parents are here. So it's like it feels like home for me in a real way.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And your life is getting, crazy last year since the American Fiction, of course, which we're going to talk about. But I'm more interested at the moment, like, how does it feel, being traveling around, talking about a film, meeting people around the world, having this recognition after so many years of, trying?
It feels nice, I think that it's... Look, anybody who puts anything into the world wants people to enjoy it and hopes that people like it. And so I think that sort of people just enjoying the film, you make movies for people to see them. And so we made this movie with not a lot of money. There wasn't a lot of sort of like grand auspices underneath it. We just sort of made it because we were passionate about it. And the fact that people have responded to that passion has been wonderful.
Okay, so let's start now.
We hadn't started?
Yeah, we started, but
okay.
I want to talk about you more now, because American Fiction is something that comes at the end of a long journey for you. And this journey was quite interesting because you and me shared a similar career path at one point in life.
Yeah.
Because you worked as a journalist for a long time. How many years you did that?
About 9 years.
Yeah.
It was right after college. university, I guess you'd say here. Right after university, I went and became a communications coordinator at a small nonprofit organization. But I didn't really like my day job. I kind of felt miserable, and every night I would come home and write, just sort of for myself, just because I was passionate about it. And about a year after I was doing that, I met a guy, one of my neighbors, who turned out, and we just were at a party and chatting at a party, and he said, he asked me what I did, and I said, I work at this nonprofit, but I think I'd like to be a writer. And he said, well, it turns out that I'm an editor of a magazine, of a music magazine. It was called Filter at the time. It doesn't exist anymore, I don't think. But
many of those doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly, unfortunately.
You work for Gawker also,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. It doesn't exist anymore. Exactly. And so he hired me to do a small article about an artist named Jolie Holland, I remember. He paid me $50 for a 500-word article about her, and that was my first piece of published journalism. And so then it started. I started getting more work and doing more freelance stuff, and then it got to a point when I was making so little money at my day job at the nonprofit that I started making an equivalent amount of money just doing freelance journalism, and I felt like my day job makes me miserable, and so why not just do something that I actually enjoy if I'm going to make this little money? And so I quit and just started doing journalism full time, and I did that. So it was 2015, and I did that until I started working in television in 2014.
Okay, in television in 2014. But prior to that, because I've read one of your articles, which was very interesting, and I think that one kind of got you on the path of these ideas and topics that you're kind of obsessing about, which has its underlying thing about it is racism and race culture in the United States, which is something very particular. It's a particular thing to talk about, so I want to kind of slowly ease into it.
Great.
Because I read your article called The Racism Beat. Yeah, the racism beat, which kind of felt like revolving door of violence, telling the same story over and over again, and in which way you can contribute to the conversation about this race thing in culture and in the way it's perceived in American society. And how did you switched from, for example, writing about the music and being freelance journalism toward those kind of topics?
Yeah, I think that, one of the things that I like about being a journalist is that very frequently it forces you to be kind of like a Renaissance person. It forces you to be curious about a lot of different things in the world. So some days I would be writing about music, and some days I would be writing about politics, and then sort of like another day I might be writing about some sports in some way. And so I sort of was a generalist for a long time and just covering a lot of different things. And because I'm pretty curious about the world, I think that I just have this natural curiosity within me that I was able to scratch that itch with journalism. And
that's what I would put it other way around. I would say that you need to be curious first to become a journalist.
Exactly. It
doesn't force you to be curious.
Exactly. And so I think that for me, I got to a point when when I really sort of hit my stride in journalism, when I really started sort of getting on my feet, Obama had just been elected.
Okay.
And so sort of race was really at the forefront of the American conversation, and sort of what Obama meant to the country, and sort of how racial politics were going to play out now that we had a black president. So, and I sort of felt I think that was important. I think that one of the problems in America is that sort of we sort of, I think like a lot of people, are afraid to talk about these things. We're nervous to talk about race. We're nervous to talk about sexuality. We're nervous to talk about identity. It feels taboo, and sort of people naturally get very emotionally invested in these topics, and so it's easy for them to get out of hand and just to turn into arguments as opposed to discussions. And so for me, it just felt like a topic that I was interested in. Yeah. It just felt like a topic that I could contribute to, and I think that especially when you're starting out as a journalist, you're looking for sort of what's going to make you unique. You're looking for what your voice has that others don't. And so I started writing a lot about race, and at first I think that I enjoyed it, but then after years of doing that, it just got to a point when I realized that this is not this isn't what makes me happy. You know, it's not. It's I don't feel like, and I don't feel like I'm actually. I don't feel like my work is actually contributing.
Yeah.
I think that it started to feel like, as you said, like this revolving door of violence and tragedy, and it felt like, you know, I got to a point when it was like, okay, I've done this. Now I want to write about other stuff, you know, but I backed myself into a corner in some ways where people didn't want me to write about other stuff at that point. It was kind of like, well, we're coming to you to write about racism. Like, we don't need you to write about the other stuff. And so part of my inclination to jump into television when I did was because I felt like I had kind of hit a plateau with my journalism career. I didn't feel like I had.
In which way?
I just don't feel like I had much. I was working at a place like I was working at Gawker, as you said, which was this tabloid news website, and I didn't really see myself. You know, I liked Gawker. I really liked working there, and I felt like the work that we did was important a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time, and I didn't see myself though going from Gawker to the New York Times, for instance, or the New Yorker, these sort of like really the sort of like last handful of like really stable journalism jobs in the United States, or these basically like 3 or 4 outlets.
Yeah, Washington Post maybe.
Exactly. And so I didn't see myself going to those places, and it felt like the thing I liked about Gawker was that there wasn't a lot of rules. You could sort of do what you wanted to do. And I knew that if I left that for another journalism job, I wouldn't have that anymore. It would sort of like be far more rigid and sort of like, here's what you need to do. And so I just felt like I felt like I just had hit a ceiling in where I could and wanted to go in journalism. And it felt like, you know, I was lucky because a guy just called me and he read my journalism and he asked if I wanted to come work on his TV show. So
okay, which one? What was the first
one? Was called Survivor's Remorse.
Okay, the one that LeBron produced.
So it was based loosely on LeBron James's life, and so he was a producer on it. And the showrunner is this guy named Mike O'Malley, and he asked me if I would be interested in taking the job in the writers' room. I'd never written for TV before. I'd written one script, but it was really bad, and sort of like I was trying to make it better. And so it was just happenstance. I was just very lucky.
Okay, and so how did the writing for TV differ from the journalism career? In which way? And how much did you have to adapt?
It's very different on its face immediately because, you know, writing for me had been such a lonely exercise.
Okay.
It was sort of like it was just me and my computer, you know. And when I worked at Gawker, the last 2 years of my journalism career, I lived in LA and the offices were in New York, so I didn't even have colleagues that I saw. It was just literally there. I realized one day I had sort of left my house to go to the gym. And I went from the gym to pick up dinner, and sort of I had my headphones in, and I realized that I hadn't said a single word to anybody the entire day. The entire day it was just sort of like me silent. Despite the fact that I'd communicated a bunch, I just literally hadn't said anything. And it felt like, okay, I need to sort of get out of my bedroom and get out in the world and try to work with other people. And so that to me was the most exciting thing about working on TV was you weren't just working with other writers, you're working with directors and actors and costume designers, and sort of like it's this big, beautiful collaborative effort that it was so fun and thrilling and just such
there's
a
writing room, like going back and forth with other people.
Exactly. And so it just felt like, oh, I started to feel like I really got into my comfort zone there. It felt like this is what I was looking for is the creativity, but also being able to sort of engage and build something and collaborate with other smart people.
I've seen many of the stuff that you worked as a writer at. For example, I guess everybody saw Master of None, you know, and the Watchmen series. I've seen just a few months ago, I've seen Station 11, which was fucking awesome.
Thank you so much.
But all of those shows differ very much from each other. And how much was the challenge, adapting and contributing to those shows in a way? Master of None is one kind of comedy type of, but Station 11 is completely different. It's like a post-apocalyptic with deeply rooted in Shakespearean drama, and having a bunch of similarities with the COVID-19, of course. And then again,
which was totally unexpected. We started writing that show in September of 2019. We had no idea that COVID was going to happen.
A few months before.
It's crazy. It was the craziest coincidence.
So how was that experience like? Working for Station 11, and how big was the response to it?
It was. I mean,
because I don't know many people who actually watched it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I think people who watched the show really loved it.
Yeah.
I think one of the unfortunate things about it was that I also think that a lot of people were just traumatized, understandably, by COVID, and heard the idea of like a pandemic show and were just like, not for me. I don't need it. And I think that that's unfortunate, because I think that the show, despite being about a pandemic, is actually not cynical at all and not very dark. I mean, it's dark obviously because a lot of people die, but I think that show, what the show offers is a view of humanity that sort of like thrives after a tragedy and sort of like can find ways to come together again, and not, it's not violent and sort of like tragic and tumultuous. It's kind of like people reset and say like, we need to sort of like be kind to each other again, and sort of I think it's this optimistic view. But I think that what really connects the dots between all those different projects that I worked on, like Master of None is so vastly different from Station 11. But again, besides I think curiosity, which I think sort of like every artist should have, like journalists, I think what you really have to have to be a great artist is, I think you just really need to love people. I think you really need to love all kinds of people. I don't think that you can be a good artist and feel bias against human beings. I think that the to me the best pieces of art aren't didactic. They're not moral. They don't sort of like scold. They just show human beings in their element and sort of like doing what human beings do, and sometimes making mistakes, but trying to sort of like do right by the world. Like even for me, I think that I love a villain in a movie who you kind of can empathize with, I think that one of the greatest recent villains in movie history is Michael B. Jordan's character in Black Panther, right? Who's sort of like, where you're kind of like, oh, maybe he's got a point though, I think that's important to realize, is that writing villains who are kind of like mustache twirly and want to destroy the world just for the sake of destroying the world is always boring to me, because I think that like human beings have more depth than that. And the vast majority of people wake up every day and they say, I'm going to do right by the world today. I'm not out to sort of like be a bad person, but a lot of people make bad choices, and I think that's far more interesting to me. So all that's to say that I think that one of the things that connects everything that I do is I'm just really interested in layered, nuanced characters and complex people, sort of like who are going through complex situations. And I think that if you just go into it loving human beings and being interested in why human beings do the things that they do, that to me is a really, really valuable and necessary tool for artists, because I think that it allows you then to go from a show like Master of None, which is obviously a comedy, not necessarily a broad comedy like sitcom, but it's funny and sort of it does what it does, and then going to like Watchmen, which is like a weird comic book story, and then going to Succession, which is sort of like a grounded family drama. Like I think the sort of the connection between all those things is just a love for sort of human being and character, and building those characters so they feel like you start to really empathize with them after a while.
But how challenging, for example, was adapting Watchmen into a TV series, because it was a graphic novel, first of all, and it has a huge legacy behind it, and then became an insanely popular film, and then adapting those things into like a mini TV series. Yeah. How difficult was it, and how challenging was it?
It was really difficult. That was the longest writer's room I've ever been in. We were writing that show for about 2 years.
Every day.
Yeah, well, not every day, not me, because I actually had to go work on a different show, sort of like for a few months in between there. So I actually wasn't. I had to sort of like leave and come back to the writers' room. But we wrote it for a long time, and it was challenging. Mostly because, I mean, any adaptation and any writing is challenging, but it was also challenging because, as you said, it had this really sort of tremendous legacy. There were people who really, really, really loved that source material, and it means a lot to them. And one of those people is Damon Lindelof, the guy who created the show. And so Damon was also incredibly, because, you know, the history behind that, I'm not sort of revealing anything that Damon hasn't revealed here, but so Damon grew up. Damon's father was a big comic book guy, and he got Damon very much into comic books. And so Damon, his father has died. His father's no longer with us. And so Damon remembered, though, as a child, going out and buying Watchmen when it was sort of like coming out monthly to read the comics with his father. So he had this very sort of like emotional connection to the material that also sort of like made it difficult because he loved it so much and didn't want to sort of like destroy this thing that he loved. So it was challenging, but it was also incredibly fun. I think that so much of filmmaking and making television is just creative problem solving. That's all it is.
But the thing with it is, when you have something that has such a huge legacy, you have to deliver in two ways. Like, for example, you have to deliver for the hardcore audience who expect certain things.
Yeah.
So you cannot disappoint them in a way, but at the same time you have to contribute to bring in some new elements, and hoping they will be accepted and bring this thing to a light in a different way.
Yeah, and the thing that Damon taught us that I've really taken with me, the thing that I took with me on American fiction when I read Erasure, the most important lesson that I took from the Watchmen room was Damon saying, like, listen, we are going to create something that's brand new that people have not seen before. Obviously, the source material is what it is, and everything that happened in the comic book will have happened in our world. But we also need to realize that we need to really build and sort of like go from there. And so, you know, any creative person, especially a writer, can sort of understand the excitement of that blank page, but then there's also the terror of that blank page, because then it's like you can just get, you know, you can be paralyzed by choice and just not go anywhere. And so the restrictions that he gave us while allowing us to be creative was, he said that it needed to feel like Watchmen. Everything sort of like, so even if it was a brand new, crazy off the wall idea, as long as it felt like sort of like the original Watchmen made you feel, then that was a good pitch. And so there would be pitches where people would say, like, what about this character? What about this storyline? And he would say, like, that's interesting, but it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like an idea that could have existed in the original comic book. And so that was really sort of like what guided us, was this idea that, you know, we knew who Watchmen was kind of like sexually weird and politically weird and kind of, you know, pretty dark and you know, could be like a little cynical at points. So it was I think that was our sort of like, those were our guideposts when we were sort of thinking about what the show was going to become. Yeah,
this is very interesting, because in certain ways you have to have some kind of anchor points in which you would say, like, this is something that we have to do. Yeah. And now this gives us certain brackets within we can move. Yeah. And those restrictions sometimes can be great for creativity, but sometimes they can be really difficult to express yourself. Exactly. And you have to problem solve the situation in a certain, and you have to deliver it in the deadline. You know? Yeah, so you have a deadline. Exactly. And I love this Douglas Adams quote about deadlines, when he said, I love deadlines, I love that swoosh sound they make as they fly by. So I'm guessing there was a lot of pressure with deadlines.
I mean, but fortunately, there actually wasn't a lot of pressure with deadlines, fortunately, because Damon, I think, is so respected and beloved by the people at HBO that he said, like, this is going to take some time. You know, this isn't going to be the kind of show that we write in 5 months. It's going to be, and I think that I wish that we got that a lot more, that leeway. I think that sort of the as it stands now, I think that a lot of writers' rooms these days are kind of treated like factories, and it's kind of just like you come in and you clock in, and then you need to sort of like do this by this time. And I understand deadlines. I understand the importance of them. We're spending a lot of money. These writers' rooms are expensive, and so you want to sort of not waste people's money. But I also think that art frequently isn't efficient.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that we're trying to treat like art like it should be efficient these days.
So we have two recurrent themes now going on for the American fiction. One is the way you understand adaptations and in which way you contribute to the original pieces of work, and the second one is the money problem.
Yeah, exactly.
And the gambling with and how this whole business behind the idea works within the industry, and how can you push your ideas through and bring them to life.
Yeah.
So before we jump into that, let's go back a little bit to you in a way. So you were writing for these productions for other shows, but at the same time you were trying to produce your own shows, which fell somewhat disappointing in your life.
Yeah.
And you had I think what it was, you said 2019, 2020 like was one of your worst years in life.
Yeah.
What happened, man?
Well, obviously the COVID happened, so it was everybody had a bad 2020. Yeah,
only COVID.
But in the midst of that, I also was very, very close to getting a TV show that I made on the air, and it was so close to getting it made that they started telling me, here's where I should start looking for my apartment in New York because it would be close to the production offices. And then at the last minute, they pulled the plug and said they weren't going to make it anymore. And I was just really, really creatively adrift. I was feeling really bereft. And I sort of started feeling like it wasn't going to happen for me. I thought that, I would work in other people's writers' rooms, and that would be, I would be sort of like able to make a good living and be allowed to be creative, which, that's a nice life. But I just thought that as far as making my own stuff, that sort of dream was gone. I was about to be 40, and it just felt like this isn't going to happen for me. And 2 months later, I was walking through a bookstore, and I had read about this book Erasure, and I thought, okay, I'm going away for the holidays, and sort of like I'll have like a week to just read and zone out. And so I picked it up, and within 50 pages, I knew that I wanted to try to adapt it. Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't it feel once now when you look back at those situations, doesn't it feel like it's a necessary thing to happen?
Absolutely. Because if that TV show had gone, I would have been busy over the holidays. I wouldn't have been looking for a book to read in a bookstore, and I wouldn't have picked that up. And so, I think that, when a door closes, a window opens. I think that, opportunity exists around the corner if you look for it. So I feel, that it was just a really good lesson to this idea that like you need to give up is like anytime you do that, there's going to be another opportunity around the corner.
Yeah, and then you found out about this book, Erasure, by the author Percival Everett, and which was written back in 2001. So it was like a 20-year-old book at the time.
Yeah.
And what was it about the book that that swept you in a way it did?
I had never. It felt like a book that was written specifically for me.
In which way?
So the lead character, Monk, is a black writer living in Los Angeles. I was a black writer. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I was a black writer living in Los Angeles. He had two siblings. I have two siblings. The relationship dynamics between the siblings are very similar to the relationship dynamics between my siblings. He had an ailing mother who he moved home to take care of. I moved home to take care of my mother toward the end of her life. He had a very overbearing father figure who sort of like weighed heavily in his life. I have a very overbearing father figure who weighs heavily in my life. And he was also struggling with sort of like the restrictions that people were putting on black writers and telling him what he could and couldn't create as a writer of color. And that was also sort of a struggle that I was having in my career at the time. And so it really, really felt like I started reading. It almost felt like autobiographical. And it just sort of, and I think that's the key to good adaptation also is just finding something within the story that really feels personal to you so that you can come in and really add something to it instead of just making a carbon copy of it. And so just it truly felt like somebody had said, like, I'm writing you a gift. And it was amazing.
Yeah. Just a second. Do you want some more water maybe?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. So And this is very interesting in a way, like because this brings us back to the article that I've mentioned, the racism bit, which so you went out of journalism, of hoping that you're gonna find more liberty in writing about black characters outside of this horrible stereotypical presentation of them in the media.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you found yourself, even in the world of fiction, being restricted in the same way.
Exactly.
Yeah, how that felt.
Terrible. I mean, it was I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, although I was surprised. It was, as you said, I left behind like this racism beat. I left behind the job where I was just writing about black tragedy all the time. And I got to the world of fiction where I felt like, okay, now I can write about anything.
Yeah.
We can write about black people riding unicorns. We can write about black people on Mars. Like we can put these characters wherever we want. We're not beholden to sort of any sort of like tragedies in the world. Yeah. And even there, it was like people were like, well, do you want to write a movie about slaves? Do you want to write a movie about drug dealers? Do you want to write a movie about gang members? And it felt like, oh, even here,
yeah,
even where there are no restrictions to what we can do, people have such a limited perspective of what it means to be like live a black life and what sort of like black writers are able to do.
Yeah, and this is where American fiction is transcending the particular topics of the particular themes of American society in more universal ways of seeing life, for example, because we don't have the same context and the same history as the American society does, of course, but we do still have our own problems here,
yeah,
which are kind of, carbon copy of the same thing in a different way. For example, coming from these Balkan countries, there's a way the people perceive you,
sure.
the way they expect you to behave, the topics that you're allowed to talk about.
Yeah.
If you're trying to move away from those things, it doesn't feel like you belong there. It's not something that's gonna be, for example, if our actors go to the States, they're always gonna play some, I don't know, Russian guys or some Albanian mafia guys or something like that. They're not gonna be casted.
Yeah.
So they're gonna be typecast, and the screen and the scripts that are accepted are always same kind of scripts. Like,
Absolutely.
let's talk about the war in the Balkan countries. Like,
Yeah.
let's not talk about the universal love story or something like that.
Absolutely.
So it's very difficult to penetrate this bubble of expectations they have toward you because of the stereotypes that exist in those places.
I'm sure.
Yeah. So fighting those and talking about those, even though it's not literally the same plot, but it has this underlying universal theme going on, which kind of made it, awesome.
Thank you.
Because I have to be perfectly honest, because I've seen film in March completely by accident.
Oh yeah?
So my wife, she was putting our daughter to sleep. I was switching through streaming platforms, so there was nothing on Netflix, there was nothing on HBO at the moment that I wanted to watch. There was nothing on Disney, and I was like, let's go to Amazon Prime. I don't know, maybe there's something there. And I saw this American fiction, what is this? Never heard of it, but it's a good cast. Sounds like a good premise. I love literature. Let's play it. And it took me by surprise. I did not. I never heard of it before.
Yeah.
I never read anything about it, so I completely
snuck up on you.
Snuck up on me. So I completely went like as a blank page. Just knew nothing about it, and it took me by surprise. And it was really good.
Thank you.
And I love the way. So this is the thing about satire, which I would like you to dive into it a bit more, because in order to understand satire, you have to understand the underlying theme, and the underlying theme of what you're talking, the thing that you're talking about, which is the particular culture and particular society, particular political thing or whatever. So you have to understand this culture and this society. So you have to be engrossed, for example, in American history, in American culture, in order to understand why this is a satire and why is this so important. And but this film has has such a much more wider audience than the American one. So how was received around the world, and what was the thing that people found interesting about it? What was your expectations from the audience, and what caught you by surprise, the way they understood it and their interpretations?
I think that for me, the fact that I'm sitting here in Sarajevo having shown the film last night is, to me, just it's a real beautiful moment for me. This sort of like is because when I was making the film, I was nervous that it wouldn't travel. I was nervous that it would be so American, and the politics of it would be so American that people wouldn't understand it necessarily in other countries. And so I'll tell you what took me by surprise, and what shouldn't have, because if you really think about it, was the sort of reception that we received by all kinds of people, not just Black Americans, not just white Americans, old people, young people. We've shown the film now in London and France and now Bosnia, and it feels like this sort of like, not every person who's seen it likes it, obviously, but every kind of person. I've seen every kind of person now come out of the theater saying that they've found something that sort of like resonated with them. And I think that the key is, and what I didn't realize when I was making it, is that, really the sort of like theme of one of the main themes, if not the theme of the film, is sort of, it's about freedom, and it's about what happens when people don't feel free to be themselves. So whether that's Monk in his writing, or his brother and his sexuality, the things that sort of hamper us and really sort of restrict us from living the life that we want to live. Yeah. And so to me, I think a lot of people understand that. I think a lot of people, all kinds of people, understand what it's like to sort of be pigeonholed or stereotyped, or sort of like told that this is what you do because you look this way, or you're from this place. I think that a lot of people feel sort of like the burden of expectation and the burden of stereotype on them. Yeah. And so to me, I think that was ultimately what it made it, I think, resonate with a lot of people was I think people could empathize, particularly obviously people of color and women and gay people. They obviously can sort of like empathize with the characters a little bit more maybe, but overall I think a lot of people understand what it feels like to sort of want to live free and be who you want to be, and be restricted because of sort of what societal expectations are.
Yeah, but I like the way those expectations were talked about without explicitly saying what the expectation is. Yeah. For example, I wrote down the way they are circling around the thing without verbalizing the thing, like saying like, "Oh, I see what you're doing." Yeah. Or for example, "You know what I mean." Yeah. They're saying, and those kind of sentences go throughout the entire film. Yeah. Underlying this comment that hangs in the air, like, "You're not black enough." Yeah. So what does it actually mean, being black enough?
That's the thing. I think that one of the stories from my professional career is that 3 months before I found this book, I got a script back. I'd written this script and sort of sent it into the network, and I'd gotten a note back that the character, the lead, who was black, needed to be blacker. That was an actual note that came back, and so I said,
"Physical note, like somebody wrote it."
Yeah, no, nobody wrote it. Nobody was, I think, would dare put it down in the ink. But it came through a sort of like it came through my manager as an emissary, and I told my manager, I said, it really pissed me off, and I said, "I will indulge this note. I will sort of like consider it if whoever is giving it will sit across the table from me and tell me what they think it means to be blacker, and I'll listen to that." And of course, that note went away because nobody was willing to sort of take that meeting. And so, to me, that is the frustrating thing, is that we know what it means when they say they want it to be blacker. They means they want them to speak a certain way and dress a certain way and listen to a certain kind of music and have a certain kind of background, probably fatherless and poor. It's this idea that we have this monolithic existence, and I think that's what look. Certainly, there are black people in gangs. There's black people addicted to crack. There's black people who live in the projects. That's a real thing that happens. But also in America, we've also had a black president. We're on the verge of having a second black president.
Yeah.
And so, you know, those polls in the world of like president and slave, there's also millions of stories to tell between those two poles about black people who are neither president nor slave, who are just regular Joes. And so I think that for me, that is really sort of like what I'm trying to get across is like, it's not that, you know, I'm not saying that movies about slaves should go away. I'm not saying that movies about people in the project should go away. Those are some people's real lives. And I think that some of those movies and TV shows made about those things are very important, particularly in a country like America, which really likes to sort of like suppress its past and pretend that sort of it never did anything wrong in the world. And so I think that it's important to tell those stories. I just want the same variety of stories for black people that white people get, you know, and Jewish people get, you know, it's like, it's, you know, I think that Jewish film sort of like spans from like, Schindler's List, but it also goes to like Woody Allen films, sort of like lighthearted rom-com romps, you know, and sort of this idea that there's a breadth of the stories that they have. And so I just think I just think that blacks in America have not been given the sort of same opportunities to tell the breadth of their stories and tell sort of like their full lives the way that other cultures have been given that.
Yeah, but there's also this thing, for example, in our ecosystem, media ecosystem and, you know, films ecosystem, but also in other countries, so I'm guessing it's the same thing in the States, is when you're approaching people with this kind of idea and everybody's going to be like, wow, that's really original, that's really cool, that's really nice. But when you ask them about the money,
exactly.
It's a different story. So there's also, it's a one thing to write about, to adapt this book Erasure into a script and, you know, doing everything that's in your power to prepare and to prepare for the movie, but it's a completely different story finding the money for it.
Yeah, exactly.
So how was this going for you?
Not easy. It was. You know, getting money for anything is difficult, as you said. I think that but this was a project. The reason I went with my production company, the T Street, who were wonderful partners, was because they were the only producers that I met who said, we are going to make this movie. They said, we have, as long as it sort of like comes under a certain budget, we have the ability to just greenlight projects with these financiers, MRC, who've been wonderful. And so they said, we're just going to make the movie. And no producer had said that before. Everybody said that we're going to attach an actor and sort of like get people on it. And then we'll package it up, which is very common in Hollywood. And then we'll go out and sell the project. And these people, and sort of you can do that. And then sometimes you'll take it out and it won't sell. And sort of it'll just end up dead. And so I just always sort of like go with the people who say we're going to make it. And so I went with them, and then we took it out to distributors after we met with the producers and the financiers, and we met with like every big studio and streamer in town. We went to sort of like 14 different meetings.
Okay.
And everybody was enthusiastic in the meeting, like, oh my God, I love the script. Oh, Jeffrey Wright, we love Jeffrey Wright because he was attached by that point. And it's like people were very, very enthusiastic. And then when it came time to make offers on the film, it was kind of nothing. It's crickets.
It's not black enough.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody said that, but that's sort of like, I'm sure what they did say was, what a lot of people did say was like, I really wish that I worked at a company where we could make this movie. I really wish I worked at a company where we could make this movie. And that, and what that meant was that they, you know, the only thing that you can understand that to mean is that they just don't have the courage. You know, that's all. That's what they're saying is that we do not have the will to make this. We think that this is good. We think that the product is good, but we don't have the. You know, I just can't get the sort of buy-in, the political buy-in that I need to make this. And it's, you know, the companies that were telling me this were companies that regularly make $150 million movies, like consistently, you know, if not more expensive than that. And the budget for my film was a drop in it's like literally the catering budget for some of these bigger movies. That's how much it costs to make our entire film. And so, for me, that was the most frustrating thing was seeing firsthand just how how cowardly a lot of these companies are, you know, and it's just when it comes to telling new stories and sort of like giving people opportunity who haven't had opportunity before. It was frustrating, certainly.
Yeah. Have you seen any of those people after the Oscars?
Oh, yeah. It's nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So, change of heart, I'm guessing. Yeah. And maybe some remorse.
Yeah, maybe. But I think that, but you know, honestly, that like I don't sort of like, I don't want to like, I have no ill will toward those people. They're doing their jobs the best that they know how to do their jobs. But I just hope that what does happen is that there's an understanding that, you know, it's worth taking a risk, and sort of like they you know, you had the opportunity to make this movie and you turned it down because you sort of like you were too afraid to take the risk. And so I just hope that it's a lesson that like, hey, you know what? Just try taking a risk, and sometimes some good things are going to happen for you.
It does feel like a breath of fresh air, and it does feel like you are bringing certain kind of change, or at least inspiring it. You know, now people would be maybe more open towards these kind of scripts and open towards because one of the feelings that I got after watching this film was like, damn, we need more independent films. You know, like it seems like this is fading away. Like 15 years ago, it would be a thing, you know, you can see. For example, we have Alexander Payne here. Yeah. His films and like were made in the early 2000s. Yeah. It seems like impossible thing to make this kind of films today.
Totally.
Yeah. And seeing your film now, it's just like a breath of fresh air, like bringing hope back, like you know, like a light at the end of the tunnel or something like that. But how difficult was it to adapt it in a way you did from the book? Because how much differs from the original book, and how was this process like? Because I'm guessing you collaborated in a way with Percival Everett on the script, and he approved it. You know, he had to approve it in a way.
He had to approve it, but I didn't collaborate with him on it at all. He was sort of like, he just gave me the rights to it, and then. But then, he said, "Go write a script, and then if you write the script."
Did he read the script?
That's what he did. He kind of approved it in that way, and that before he then officially signed off on giving me the rights, he has to read the script. And so that was a terrifying 48 hours where where I was thinking like, oh my God, what if he reads it and hates it and says no? After I've put all this work into it, but fortunately he said yes. Percival and I have become pretty good friends, actually. I see him regularly for meals, and we chat about a lot of this stuff. And I think he was the perfect collaborator in that he gave me his creative approval, because then I also showed him a cut of the film. He came over to my house and watched a cut of the film and enjoyed it. And so I think that, you know, but he also never gave input. He never said like, here's what I think you should do. He just said like, can I see it? And I showed it to him, and he said, I like this. And then he went away, you know. And I think that to me is it's the best relationship you can have with somebody, because I think that, you can have with somebody whose work you're adapting, because I think that if they feel too close to it and get resentful, then that sort of like makes for a messy, you obviously don't want that to be a relationship. But you know, the support that I got from him just it meant the world to me. Yeah. And I think that again, the adaptation didn't feel that difficult because I felt so personally connected to the material.
It felt more natural doing it.
I just felt so close to it.
Yeah. And one thing that I also liked, and I'm interested in a way, how much did you put actual thoughtful work into it? I'm really interested in it because the film walks a fine line in between, you know, satire, comedy, but it's not a ha-ha laughing, you know, it just, because it also feels deeply moving and emotional, and, you know, raises certain questions, and it's very serious on certain topics. So finding this balance in between having a comedy but without being a comedy, having drama without being a drama, you know, walking somewhat in between the worlds, but grabbing from each of those worlds what you need and balancing it out. Like how difficult was that, and was that done on purpose?
Yeah, I think that when I set out to make it, when I set out to make it, I knew that I wanted it to just feel like life.
Yeah.
And life is neither comedy nor tragedy. It's sort of frequently both on the same day. So I didn't want it to feel like slapsticky and silly. I wanted it to feel grounded and real. And I also wanted it to, feel real, and that it had moments of dramatic tension and sort of like moments of sadness and death. And I think that, those kind of loss and grief, like those are things that we all deal with. And I think that for me, there may come a day when I want to make something super dark and it's just going to be sort of miserable. I think that I love those kinds of movies sometimes, and maybe there comes a day when I want to make something really silly and sort of like slapsticky.
Yeah.
But I think that for me, this one, at least sort of like what I'm into now, is I want it to feel like life. And I think that for me, it does a disservice to sort of, I think, your characters when they're just in too much misery, because that's not how human beings are. Human beings are resilient, and human beings get knocked down and they stand up again, and human beings go through horrific tragedy, and it doesn't define their entire life. They still find ways to enjoy their life and live full, enriching existences. So I just wanted it to sort of like walk the line walk the line of sort of like what life feels like. And that was, they say that you make a movie 3 times. The first when you write it, the second when you shoot it, and the third when you edit it. And that is very much where I found I very much found the tone of the film in the third making of the film, in the edit. Yeah, it was like, sometimes I'd write a scene and I wouldn't realize that it was like maybe a little too silly, and then I'd get to set and we'd be shooting it, and then maybe even then I didn't realize it was a little too silly, or the opposite, that it was a little too dark, and sort of it was going to be difficult for the audience to pull out of that darkness. And so where we really found the exact line was in post, when it was like, when we were sort of like, it's like, this scene is great except for this last 5 seconds, it's really sad. And so like, let's cut these last 5 seconds and sort of like draw it back a little bit. And that helped.
So you actually had moments like, this is too silly, this is too funny, like turn the volume down a bit.
Yeah, like, absolutely. Many, like, there are entire scenes actually that were like that were really funny and really good, but it wasn't the movie that we're making.
Does it hurt taking them out?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But I think that there's like some really great stuff that was left on the cutting room floor, but it hurts. That pain sort of like goes away. It sort of, or at least is diminished when you look at the movie without those things in it and realize that it's a better movie because of it. Yeah. Like it's not worth sacrificing the quality of the film for the quality of a single scene. It's sort of like sometimes a great scene just ruins the movie and sort of like ruins the momentum or ruins the tone. And so it becomes easier to swallow once you play back the film and you realize like, oh, that was a great scene, but like the movie works much better without it. Yeah.
And this being your directorial debut, film being low budget, was it difficult, to bring Jeffrey on board?
No. That was the really sort of astounding thing, and a thing that I think is really a testament to Jeffrey's sort of like artistic sensibilities and sort of like his creative spirit, was that it was never money nor my inexperience. Sort of like he never hesitated based on either of those things. And I think that a lot of people pay lip service, I think, to helping bring in sort of like young new voices and marginalized voices. And I think that one of the ways that they can do those things is supporting people who sort of are inexperienced. And Jeffrey did that for me. The minute Jeffrey signed on, the movie kind of became real for a lot of people, where it was like, whoa, you got Jeffrey, right? Okay. Now we're going to pay attention to you.
You got my attention.
Yeah, exactly. And whereas it was just me before, people were like, this script is good, but you haven't directed anything before, So him coming aboard really changed the tenor of a lot of people's interest in the film.
And one of the best thing about it was like, it's your directorial debut, but you won an Oscar for what you actually did your entire career.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is kind of a testament to, doing your thing and, being true to yourself and actually getting, the work paid off.
Yeah, thank you.
And it seems like you have entered a new chapter in your life. Like it's so.
Yeah, I think that the chapter that I've really entered is that I just feel like it. One of the things that getting rejected so much does is it starts to. You start to sort of, at least I did. I started to have this little voice in the back of my head, like when I said that I wasn't sure if I would ever make something of my own. There was this little voice in the back of my head that was saying, like, maybe you need other people. Maybe you need somebody to create a TV show for you to work on because you can't create your own show. Maybe it's not good enough. Maybe your work isn't good enough. Maybe your work is good enough, but if for whatever reason it's not going to succeed. Like I just started really diminishing my own sort of like creative spirit, It was like, maybe this isn't, you're not good at this, you're not as good at this as you think you are. And I think that one of the things that being allowed to make something does is it really, and being able to release it and sort of like get a reception from people does is it gives you those kind of like creative wins again. It puts the winds in your sails again and says like, you know what, maybe I do have something that is worthwhile. And I think that for me, that was a really important new chapter in my life, was sort of like the understanding that like, okay, I can step away from like my bosses at Succession and The Good Place and Watchmen and sort of like these really successful TV series, these TV creators, like maybe I don't need them sort of like standing behind me, supporting me all the way. Yeah. Like I think that is, so there's this excitement, there's this creative excitement that I have again where it's like, oh, okay. Like you did it. You got one down. And so now it's like, let's try to do a bunch more.
What's next?
I'm working on a Western.
Wow, Western.
Yeah, I'm working on a contemporary Western. It's kind of, have you ever seen Hell or High Water?
No.
No, I highly recommend Hell or High Water. It's a very, very good movie.
Okay.
Written by Taylor Sheridan. It's about these two brothers who are bank robbers, and they're sort of like bank robbers for this very specific, important reason to them. And I won't spoil it too much, but I think it's fabulous. And so it's kind of like inspired by that, where it's about it's a Western set in present day about two brothers who are traveling throughout the American Southwest looking for their missing third brother who's disappeared 6 years before. And so I've just always loved that genre. I'm being from the American Southwest. I've always thought the desert has a really specific beauty to it, and I've always felt like, well, why am I not shooting something there in my home, And then I'm also working on an erotic thriller.
Wow,
that's
nice.
Like kind of inspired by the Adrian Lyne movies back in the day, like Fatal Attraction or Single White Female, Basic Instinct, Indecent Proposal, those kinds of things. Like I love that genre, and I think that it's due for a comeback. So
and you have open doors now, I'm guessing. So everything
I hope
is
so.
Much, at least a little less easier.
It's a little easier. That is true.
Easier.
That is true. That is absolutely true. It's always a little easier, but not by much.
Okay, Cord. Nice to meet you, man.
It's been a real pleasure talking.
Thank you for this conversation. Hope you're having a great time here in Sarajevo, and I'll see you around.
I'm having a wonderful time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is it. Bye.
Bye-bye.